what's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and today patch 9.0.5 hit live servers. You can probably hear my wandering ancient tree growling in the background here, and with it came a handful of changes. Legendary changes to Warlocks, the Valor system, some talent buffs, some actual like just baseline damage buffs, and with it comes a lot of information that I want to talk about today for each spec. And I think there's a decent bit of like misinformation about legendaries and different conduits, as well as just wrong information going around. Legendaries, conduits, covenant swaps that are going around for some reason. I don't really know why. So I want to talk about each spec today, what it got, what changed, what it means, and well, what's not changing. So now, in addition to that, when we get to the Demonology section, unfortunately, I also wanted to point this out, and I figured I should get it in the video pretty quickly. Demonology Warlocks are having issues with running out of mana again, playing the Implosion Legendary. So we'll take a look at that. Also, I am moving this weekend, guys. It has sort of happened out of nowhere. I was planning on moving in about a month and a half. I'll talk about more of that at the end of the video. If you want to skip to that, I'll have a timestamp for it. But TLDR, there might be like a brief drop in video content for a couple of days over the course of the weekend when I get relocated. Any week or as profiles or add-ons you see here, you can grab for free off my Twitch if you want to swing by, hang out, ask any questions anytime. With that being said, let's get into it and talk about Affliction Warlock. So when it comes to Affliction Warlock in 9.0.5, there were some initial changes that were talked about over the course of beta, I guess PTR, but they were reverted, and that is, well, I guess the big one is the Malefic Rapture nerf. We got some buffs like Demon Armor and a few random things. If you cast Rapture on an LOS target, it won't consume a shard anymore. That's cool. But the big Malefic Rapture nerfs, yes indeed, if you didn't see any of my 8 previous videos, those were reverted. Affliction's damage profile and baseline toolkit is the exact same way as it is, or I guess was, in 9.0. The Haunt Shadow's Embrace pet damage increase effect also was reverted in the latest, I guess most recent version of release PTR build, and that unfortunately also did not make it to live. So Affliction is essentially the same way that it has been as far as the toolkit's concerned. Now, the first thing, there's a lot of like misinformation going around talking about Malefic Wrath, the legendary. These sims are from my most recent video, and there's some misinformation going around talking about Malefic Wrath being your best in slot single target legendary. It's just not true. Just not true. So that information is outdated. It even references the old version of Malefic Wrath, and we all know that Synergy is better now. Now you can see, like, this is the post-buff Malefic Wrath sims compared to Synergy using a generic profile, 5-minute, 1-target patchwork build. It gained a lot of value from where it was. It was about a 150 DPS loss over Synergy. It's now about 20. So it gained about 130 or so DPS. It's solid. It's a substantial buff, but is it better than Synergy and pure single target? No. And the big thing with Malefic Wrath is that even if it was better in single target, that might make it good on a few fights. In Nathria, we have 3 to 4 patchwork fights. You have Hungering Destroyer, Sludge Fist, Shriekwing, and what's the fourth one? There's a fourth one. There's 4. And Enerva's sort of like a weird patchwork kind of boss, and to some extent, so is Anathrius in the final phase. But even like this, even if it was better in pure single target, anything besides single target, it loses so much value because Synergy is a straight up damage proc to either your pet, which is going to hit the boss all the time, or you. And if you have multiple dots rolling, as far as Affliction is concerned, multiple targets, you should. It's just going to be a flat damage increase to all those dots, all those raptures, whatever you do during your actual, well, Synergy window, you can call it. If Malefic Wrath is best single target, that'd be something that's fine, but you really wouldn't even play it on a whole lot of fights, and you would still err on the side of Synergy, because look at a fight even like Council of Blood, for example, when you have Agony Shard Gen versus Synergy. Technically, Agony Shard Gen might seem like the play there because we have 3 targets, we have multiple agonies rolling and all that. But at a certain point, you just can't get max value out of it because you're over shard capping. You have too many shards rolling, you can't rapture enough. It's sort of the same camp for Malefic Wrath in a sense. Even like on fights with heavy movement or multiple targets or, you know, ad spawning, you can't get the drain soul value, whether you're because you're having to move during a rapture window to refresh, or you're having to, you know, just hit multiple targets at once. What does Malefic Wrath do? It really doesn't do a whole lot. But Synergy is great single target. It's great AoE. It's a passive proc. I understand that it's a boring legendary, and it's not like it's not very engaging. It doesn't really change the rotation a lot. There are times where you can fish for a proc for a second or two, but unfortunately, boring and like. It might be boring, but it's our best in slot choice. So nothing really changes single target wise. There's also been some misconceptions about Agony chest gaining value in AoE. That's not true either. Synergy is your best legendary across the board. I think for the most part, it's been accepted that Synergy is probably a little better in plus as well at this point. I mean, there is some merit to Wrath consumption on very niche fights. So sure, Sacrolash is a bit better in PvP, but we're talking PvE here. Mythic Plus, we're talking rating, all that kind of stuff. Agony's not bad, but as far as like the Malefic Wrath rumors are concerned, they're just not true. You play Synergy and, you know, that's pretty much it. Number 2, people have been asking about a Covenant swap for Affliction Warlocks. I don't really know where this came from either. I know that Impending Catastrophe for Venthyr was buffed, so was Necrolord Decimating Bolt. But Necrolord Decimating Bolt is still terrible. Like, it is still just, honestly, just not good. Just not good. Sorry. Just not good. This is a Blood Mallet profile, but these sims are accurate as far as Warlocks are concerned. Yes, it might be playing Soul Igniter and Dreadfire Vessel, but these are accurate. So looking at pure single target sims here, Pelagos has always been a tiny bit better. Pelagos has always been ahead by about 50 or so DPS as far as pure single target affliction is concerned. But if we switch to, let's say, Hectic Agcleave here, you're going to see probably Night Fae pull ahead a bit. I should look. Yeah, exactly. Night Fae pulls ahead. And this is very important to note here because unlike Necrolord with Decimating Bolt that affects, you know, different spells per spec, Night Fae is Soul Rot. It does the same thing for all 3 specs. It'll deal good single target damage for all 3. And it will deal good AoE for all 3. It has the same actual effect versus like Necrolord being Bis for Destruction, okay for Demo, and horrendous for AF, you know. So there are some misconceptions about like Kyrian being the play for AF now. Like, I mean, this is the way it's always been. It might be a tiny bit better in pure single target, but when it comes to AoE, which there's so many fights in Castle Nathria, I mean, you have Sun King Salvation, Skirmisher adds at SLG, Denathrius, there's so many fights where you can get that Soul Rot spread cleave. Kyrian just can't compete. Yeah, you can Havoc a Scouring Tile, sure, but you can just put Soul Rot on 4 things and Rapture them all down. Grove Invigoration is incredibly strong. Night Fae is just the way for AF. There's no changes to legendaries and there's no changes to Soulbinds as far as they're concerned. Now, as far as Mythic Plus builds go, people have sort of been asking, okay, now that you've tested enough of the meme builds and everything, getting that all out of the way, what build do you like the most in Mythic Plus, and what are you going to play? It's this build out here. It's our pure single target build. This build, disregard the conduits up here for now, but this build's actually really strong, whether it's Tyrannical week or whether it's Fortified week. On Tyrannical, obviously Drain Soul or Siphon Life is very strong. It's your 3rd dot, even on 2 targets, like a Huntsman Baltimore kind of fight, like the first boss of Tyrann Scythe, for example. It's very strong. That extra dot means more Rapture value, more dot damage in the first place. It's just really good at what it does. Singularity versus Vile Taint, PS cost, no shard. You have the extra PS damage, more Rapture value, more shards to rapture things away with. 45er, Haunt, or Dark Caller. I think Haunt's the play here, even on Fortified weeks. This build is more single target based, but keep in mind that Prideful is the affix this season, and Prideful mobs on Fortified, they crush. And on Tyrannical, this build's just good anyways. So you always have priority mobs and trash packs typically, and you have Prideful mobs every 20 or so seconds. And let's be real, even when you go to a boss, this build's going to be better because you have Siphon Life. So I know that Dark Caller does indeed play a bit into, like, it makes the spec feel a lot better. Having 2-minute Dark Lair, 2-minute Dark Soul. Let's be real, Dark Souls is better cooldown anyways. Like, Dark Lair is just garbage. It's not very good in the first place. The dot extension is nice, and it does help with, you know, getting siphons rolling on every target. But this is just the better build. Playing Haunt. I truly wholeheartedly feel so. I feel this is the best build you can play in Plus. With that being said, though, conduit wise, Focus Malignancy, we're not playing it here, but Focus Malignancy and Rolling Agony with this build. If you're playing Siphon Life, the Rolling Agony duration extension is incredibly strong. It gives you more time to refresh your seed, to get your siphons refreshed, to rapture more. It makes the build feel so much better in Plus. I truly have not had this much fun playing AF in Mythic Plus for a long time. We're past playing all the meme builds now. This has been a really fun build. To a similar extent, this is the same build you play in Raid as far as single target fights go. 2 target, I mean, a bit of AC, Siphon, you know, it depends on the fight, I suppose. But what I'm getting at is not much really changed for AF. It's basically, I mean, it's pretty much the same spec they've had for a long time. Malefic Wrath is not your best single target legendary. It's Synergy. Agony Shard Gen is still worse than Synergy and AoE too, I feel. And you're still playing Night Fae. There's no weird Covenant swaps going on. The Venthyr IC buffs didn't make it relevant enough, and Necrolord still sucks for AF. I like Necrolords, but they're just not good for Affliction right now. Talking Destro lock, it's not as long as the Affliction section. Not much has really changed with Destro. We know that Cinders was buffed, but by a pretty small margin. Unlike Aff, or really Demo, that got a lot of changes, the only change that Destro got was a 1 second increase to Cinders, from 3 seconds to 4 seconds. The actual duration of the cast time reduction and the damage increase is the same. Now, I did find out recently that, and confirm that you have to actually have your second cast will hit the target before the buff on you expires to get the damage increase. It makes sense. Either way, the 4 second window adds a little bit of play in. You can sort of maybe get an extra spell in depending on haste levels and backdraft procs and all that kind of, or I guess backdraft stacks. But Destro really didn't change a whole lot. Looking at the actual sims from Cinders, well, once again, it's still just pretty far behind, even into target. If you look at it in a single target setting, it's behind, I think, by about 250 or so DPS. It gained roughly about like 30 DPS from this buff. It wasn't very substantial because they didn't hit the damage and they really didn't hit the cast time reduction. All they did was just change, you know, from 3 seconds to 4. So that's unfortunate, but Destro, I don't think Destro is in as bad of a spot as people think it is right now. I don't think it's as good as Aff and Mythic Plus, but it's not bad. It brings a lot of like front-loaded damage, so depending on the build you're playing. And there's a handful of builds you can play. Legendary-wise, I think the best legendary overall for it is Cinders. Cinders just smooth the spec out so much. Having 3 conflict rates and having the charge or the recharge time reduced by 3 seconds baseline, and having it further reduced by the amount of haste you have is actually just incredibly strong. Pairing it with Flashover makes it even stronger, and playing it with Roaring Blaze, we played this about a month ago in Mythic Plus. Roaring Blaze Cinders in Plus actually felt really good, and it brought a substantial amount of single target boss damage and priority add damage, more than I actually expected it to. Now you can play it whether with Nia, or you can play it with actual, you know, Corain here, because she has a pretty interesting set of like tricks you can do with Wild Hunt tactics and First Strike. But once again, people are asking, why are you not going Necrolord for Destro? Well, I mean, going back to what we're talking about with Affliction, Necrolord is the best covenant for Destro lock if you're playing it like in single target or 2 target cleave. Decimating Bolt is actually good for destruction. It's cool. I like Necrolords. You can see it here. Bonus miss ahead of Nia by a little bit, depending on, this is also factoring in, you know, the actual abilities they have, combat meditation, for Pelagos, for example, all that kind of stuff, and factoring in the baseline covenant ability. But when you go to, like, you know, a hectic ag cleave setting, which once again, these sims are a bit misleading at times, but it does reflect AoE. Nia's best, followed by Corain, closely, well, sort of closely, and then Dreamweaver and all that kind of stuff. It's just that Night Fae is good across the board. There's no kind of covenant swap happening. Pelagos is so low, feels bad, man. It's just that Night Fae is good universally across the board. Now, I would not fault somebody for playing Necrolord if you're playing Destro and only Destro, or maybe Destro and Demo. But if you're trying to play all 3 specs in a progression setting or just enjoy playing all 3, it sort of sucks pigeonholing yourself into one spec, or one covenant being good for one spec, like Necrolord here for Destro, and then just being mediocre for the other 2. So no covenant swaps here. Cinders is still, I feel, your best legendary overall. You do have Wilfred's as well, and you also have, I mean, technically you have the option of playing Wilfred's in Plus, or you make this in actual arenas. But Wilfred's synergy in Cinders, I think Cinders personally is the best one for Destro. It makes the spec feel so much better. It gains a tremendous amount of value in 2 target cleave, and it's controllable 2 target cleave with Havoc. You're not hoping that synergy procs at the right time. You're not hoping that you get the Inferno reduction for that Havoc window. It's, hey, we're gonna have 3 charges of conflict going into this, and we're gonna be able to crank it. We know what's gonna happen every time. That's solid. So not much really changed for Destro. Same covenants, same soulbind, same conduits, all of that. Thankfully that means there's not a whole lot of misinformation out there, but still, Destro is Destro. I think it's in a better spot than most think it is right now. Depending on the fights that we see in 9.1, whenever PTR drops and the raid testing begins, I think Destro's in a pretty good spot to be played in a handful of progression settings. We just really didn't see a whole lot of fights this year that made good use of Destro's toolkit. Well, they sort of did, but Destro was just bad. It got its 5% damage buff and the Chaos Bolt buff. Is it as good as Aff in single target? No. It's probably worse than Demo in single target if Demo's sims were totally working properly, but it's not terrible. And depending on next tier, if we have a couple Huntsman Baltimore fights or Rod Den kind of fights, or ads that demand that high-end, like fast priority burst damage that Destro locks can bring, I could see Destro being played in its current form with the current toolkit and just damage like scaling that it has right now. So that leaves us with Demonology. And Demonology is actually going to have probably the longest section here to discuss because there have been a pretty decent bit of changes to Demo. Number one, your dogs, your Dreadstalkers, their actual Dread Bite damage was buffed by 10%, as well as their attack power. But interestingly enough, I've heard actual reports that the attack power buff did not go through. I have not confirmed it yet, but that's sort of what I've heard. Now, if you're playing on US servers early on, and you might have noticed that your Dreadstalkers weren't attacking when they jumped into combat here, it was a bug. The bug revolved around having your pet either on passive or defensive and not assist. If you had it on either or and you cast your Dreadstalkers, they would jump in and come back to you. But you can see those are actually casting Dreadbite. So that bug has already been fixed. I would assume it's probably due to the hey, pets obey your commands thing now. If your main pet's on passive, it sort of makes sense, but that issue has been resolved. So outside of that, we had a handful of buffs to to Demonology Warlock. Implosive Potential was buffed today, which we'll get to in a little bit here. There's some issues with mana consumption as far as that's concerned right now. Was buffed from 8 seconds to 12 seconds, which is actually pretty big. A 50% duration buff it's big. And Implosive was already a really good choice when it came to Mythic Plus and AoE. It's just sort of niche because, well, you really didn't use it on a whole lot of fights in the raid, and depending on the boss and things, you weren't able to necessarily get value with it in Plus, but this change adds a lot of value. Number two, Balespider's Burning Core was doubled, essentially percentage wise, and the duration increased by 5 seconds. Nice. It makes a difference in single target. Not our best choice. Grim Inquisitor's Dread Calling was buffed from 3% to 4% per shard spent. So we actually ended up crafting Grim Inquisitors today at rank 3. Now, if you had seen the sims that we had run a couple days ago, well, let me actually pull it back up. Grim Inquisitors is actually performing pretty well. You were looking at Grim Inquisitors, Strength, Carnivorous, Dreadlash, Carnivorous, Grim Inquisitors, Carnivorous, Soul Conduit. The consistent thing here is that Carnivorous Stalkers is actually simming higher than Fel Commando builds. Like this build right here, Grim Inquisitors, Demonic Strength, this build is playing Fel Commando. But Grim Inquisitors, like Carnivorous Stalkers is simming higher than that. Like even playing with this build playing Fel Commando. Like the actual synergy between Dreadlash, between Carnivorous Stalkers, between the actual buff to dogs and just the legendary is really, really strong, whether you end up playing Dreadlash or not. Now, in the pure single target build, I do think that Demonic Strength is a bit better. The Demonic Strength, Vile Fiend, Grimoire, Felgar build is what you want to play with Decon. This is essentially this build here. But we did see a shift, like I said, to Carnivorous Stalkers in the actual sims. When we played with it today, Carnivorous Stalkers was impressive. Dread Bite damage was dealing about 25 to 28% of our damage in single target, this legendary, and AoE wise. It was actually really, really strong. Now, a few questions to clarify here, I guess concerns, however you want to word it. Grim Inquisitors does indeed cap out. You can see it stacking here on this weak aura. This is made by Not. It's right. It's in my Wago if you want it. It does cap out. It has a maximum 120%, I guess, damage increase. It caps out at 30 stacks. I'll push it here just to confirm it, but it's actually sort of interesting to play with in Plus. We ran a handful of keys today. Some of them weren't the best, but we got them done. The interesting thing is that if you're on like a prideful mob per se, or like a single target mob, and you know you have a large pool coming up next with like, you know, 5, 6, 7 mobs, you can sort of build your stacks here, foregoing casting your Dreadstalkers, which feels awkward, but if you're going to get a massive Dread Bite, a huge pool coming up next, it actually sort of makes sense to do so. Now, it sort of depends how long you're going to be sitting on your Dreadstalkers. You have to keep in mind you're not getting the actual Decimating or Demon Bolt procs from not casting them, but still, the relevancy was there. And you can see here we're at 120%. We're maxed out at 30 stacks. And then we run into a pack. You can just launch them for a, you know, I guess a mediocre Dread Bite here, a decent Dread Bite, but it does indeed hit really hard. That Dread Bite right there rivaled basically all the Fel Fireballs we cast before. So I guess our imps did, but there's a bit of give and play with this legendary. Now, the things I liked about Grim Inquisitors, one thing I just mentioned, you can sort of build it up for large AoE pulls you know you might have coming. The awkward part, though, is that you're not playing Wilfrids. Now, we know that Demo, from what I've heard and things, that Demo APLs aren't totally optimized around completely. There are a handful of Wilfrids custom APLs running around, I think, from some theory crafters in the community. I don't know the state of them, but I think we can all sort of agree that Wilfrids outperforms Sims. And the big thing with Wilfrids, playing Night Fae, which, I mean, most people are at this point, but even outside of that, just playing, whether you're a Night Fae or if you're an Orc, it just syncs up CDs even more. It just well. When we were playing earlier today, the big thing is that your Tyrant is now a 1.5 cooldown. It's not that minute 5, minute 10 from Wilfrids. You're not playing them. You're playing Grim Inquisitors. So it puts you in an odd spot. The first build I tested with was Summon Vile Fiend, Soul Conduit with Dreadlash and Mythic Plus. And the build was actually strong. Dreadlash was a consistent source of damage. Having it on that 20-second cooldown burst-wise was actually, it was impressive. And the cool thing about Vile Fiend was that you can Vile Fiend on cooldown. The first Vile Fiend with your Tyrant. Second Vile Fiend on its own. And you don't have to worry about, okay, where's my Tyrant at? Can I squeeze one in? No. You just go Tyrant Vile Fiend, then Vile Fiend, and then Tyrant Vile Fiend again. It's 45-second cooldown versus a 1.5. But the bad thing about that was that when you ended up going back into your second Vile or your second Tyrant, your Soul Rot's sitting off CD for like 30-ish seconds, and you can cast it a little early for the Grove Invigoration buff if it lasts through your Tyrant setup. But it was super awkward because you don't have that minute Tyrant anymore with Wilfrids. You don't have that minute Tyrant, and to a similar extent, Blood Fury is sort of sitting in that same time frame. It's a 2-minute cooldown versus 1 minute. They sort of line up in the same. They have this, like the same issues, right? It made things really awkward. Now, there were certain times where I could like maybe desync a little bit, but that's the synergy, pun have intended, that Wilfrids brings. It's going to give you every single Tyrant around the 1 minute mark, give or take. It might let you Tyrant a Prideful Lad, then Tyrant the mob after that if it lasts for a while. It might let you Tyrant this pack and know you'll have it for the boss. But when I was playing the Grim Inquisitors build, it felt a bit different. It's like, can I Tyrant this? I actually don't know, so I might not have it for this relevant pack. You didn't really have that issue with Wilfrids. I think a bit of it's getting used to actually playing with Grim Inquisitors if it ends up being worthwhile. But I'm going to be honest, it's gonna be close. I don't know if Grim Inquisitors is going to be better than Wilfrids in actual play. We sort of have to wait and see, but the awkward part was Soul Rot. And it's not just Nia with Soul Rot, because if you play Dreamweaver, you get Field of Blossoms. But that's still tied to a 1 minute cooldown. You're rocking a 1.5 Tyrant. Even if you play Karain, well sure, I mean you can play Karain, but Karain's a nightmare, Estimo, let's be real. And I don't really think you want to be in that spot looking at how good Grove Invigoration is from Nia, looking at how good Field of Blossoms is from Dreamweaver. It just seems like if you're trying to make Karain work, well, you're hindering yourself. So I was impressed with Grim Inquisitors in Plus, but I was sort of left wondering at the end if Wilfrids would have just been better. The damage was there. It's not as good as Aff would have done, albeit we're sacrificing a couple eye levels and we played like 2 less sockets with these legendaries and 1 at rank 3 as well. But it sort of left me wondering, would Wilfrids be better? I'm sort of leaning towards yes at this point when it comes to Plus, just for the consistency in Wilfrids having that 1 minute Tyrant, not losing the Soul Rot value, not losing the Blood Fury value. You might have to hold your Tyrant for a little bit depending on CDs and stuff, but Wilfrids is strong. We know this. We've seen it in the raid, we've seen it in Plus over the course of a tier. Now, single target wise, I think Grim Inquisitors actually has a bit of a chance of being more relevant because it's just consistent single target damage. You're not like deciding, okay, am I going to hit this pack or am I going to pull this? Am I going to do this or am I going to do that? But you're also still running the pure Demonic Strength, Grimoire Felguard, Vile Fiend single target build. So there's a lot of give and take with this legendary. I want to keep testing with it over the next couple of days, but I'm sort of leaning towards Wilfrids being the more practical choice when it comes to Plus, just giving you more value and just having that 1 minute cooldown in your Tyrant is a really unique CD. Not a whole lot of classes bring a 1 minute cooldown. Okay, sure. Fire Mages, okay, sure. I understand that, boys. But besides that, having that 1 minute cooldown is really relevant. Not a whole lot of classes bring that, I guess, flexibility. And even though Warlock and especially Demo is not meta, it is sort of a unique damage profile. And going back to that 1.5 Tyrant, I definitely could feel the difference. Now, the other concern with Demonology playing the Dreadlash build, and really if you're looking at playing from the shadows with it as well, was how does the build feel single target wise? One of the cool things on PTR towards the end before they fixed the FTS demonic consumption interaction was that playing FTS changed the way you wanted to set up your Tyrant a little bit. You wanted your dogs to be your last cast before it to carry over FTS into your Tyrant for the demonic consumption demon fire buff. That's gone. But with the Dreadlash changes, with the Fell Hunters or Dreadstalkers melee buff, with Carnivorous Stalkers, and with whether you're playing the legendary or not, I guess this is more skewed towards Grim Inquisitors, but you could feel a single target increase. I played this build in my last key. Now, albeit that last key was sort of a mess, but when we got to relevant bosses, you could see a bit of a single target DPS increase. This build is still a bit of a dog when it comes to patchwork pulls, but it wasn't as bad. You could feel the dog difference. You could feel the damage increase, but it's not going to come near AF single target build. And the good thing about AF is that you can play the Siphon Life Haunt build in single target. You can play it in AoE. It has more, I guess, just utility. It has more uses versus this build being really good in like trash heavy AoE pulls, fortified pulls, and then okay when it comes to single target. The damage increase, you can definitely feel it, but I just felt like it was lacking a little bit. I was left wanting a bit more, and I think it's sort of been the case for Demo over most of the expansion at this point. So one final thing that I want to touch on for Demonology here, and this was sort of mentioned at the start of the video as well, is this was sent to me by a viewer. Evil, thank you for sending it over. This is him playing the actual Implosion Legendary, which he crafted, I would assume, a bit ago. This is post duration buff. You can see his mana bar on his player frame right above the actual FTS buff. I believe that's what it is there. He's sitting at like 5% mana here. Now you can tell he has a pretty crazy amount of haste for the large implosions that he's actually launching here, but still, this is a very similar effect to what we saw at the end of BFA with expedient stacking and a lot of haste from EP. Pound for pound, this legendary, for the most part, is going to be stronger than the haste bonus EP gave us. And if you're stacking other haste effects, you get haste procs, like a changeling proc and things, you can exceed 110% haste pretty easily. He mentioned that he got up to 200 at a certain point with every proc happening. Now, this has already been passed along to Blizzard as far as, I guess, issues go. But if you guys have any logs of you actually having this issue in Mythic Plus or any kind of setting, feel free to send them my way. There's a link to my Discord down below. I'm actually really curious to see and have a couple of logs, some concrete, solid evidence to send over again if there are any issues happening. So if you guys see this on your own, feel free to send them over. But hopefully this legendary is corrected soon. So just trying to summarize all of that, there's no covenant changes or covenant swaps going on. Nothing was given enough value to warrant a covenant swap as far as Warlocks are concerned. There's some legendary buffs, but we covered all the relevant ones here. I think AF is still the best when it comes to plus. Demonology might have gained a little bit. I mean, it did with the dogs buff and stuff. Is it as good as AF? No. Destro and Demo, I think, are pretty close. They sort of bring similar but different damage profiles. But AF playing the Siphon Life build, I think is honestly just in the best place that you can be. So now we'll have to see once again how Wilfred's versus Grim Inquisitors goes over the next few weeks. I have a hunch that Wilfred's might indeed pull ahead by a little bit. I don't hate it though, because I mean it was cool testing with Grim Inquisitors, and it might end up beating out Wilfred's. I think it probably will be your second best legendary choice over Horned Nightmare, but well, there's sims and there's actual gameplay, and we're getting into the actual gameplay part now. And sims might reflect one thing, but gameplay also changes a couple of other things. As far as the mana issue is concerned with Demonology, there's not really a whole lot to say about that. We had a similar issue once again in BFA with Expedient and EP, and it does need to be addressed. The Implosion Legendary gives more haste pound for pound with like 9+ imps out. I mean, just pound for pound than the BFA one did in the first place. I mean, there's reports. I've seen some locks hit like 180, 200% haste with these massive implosions. You're going to fly through your mana, like an insane amount there. But even outside of those, the more consistent, I mean, let's be real here. If you're imploding 10 imps, you're getting, okay, 9 imps, you're getting a 45% haste increase. If you're sitting at 25 already, you're looking at 70% haste. If you get a haste proc, you're at 95. You're probably going to go a good bit. And with the duration increase added to that legendary, it sort of makes sense. Now, I would assume Blizzard just looked at this and does something to just give us more mana back. It's fine. Hopefully they do. And hopefully we're not left in that spot for a long time, because I'm actually interested in making the Implosion Legendary, but we'll see where it goes. Changing gears here briefly. Normally I don't do this in videos, but I want to let you guys know, I talked about it in the intro. I am moving in 4 days. My lease is up in this apartment at the end of April. It is now May 10th, or sorry, March 10th. Goodness, I am messed up. It's March 10th. My lease is up in this apartment at the end of April. However, one came along that is, it's basically the only apartment that I can actually find fiber internet in. And if you guys have watched my stream for a while, you've known that I've been fighting internet issues for upwards of 3 years. So we had to sort of bite the bullet and move. We're making the change, but the apartment is amazing. And I really want to thank you guys, for the YouTube support, the Patreon support, the Twitch support, however you guys have supported me over the years, just watching videos. Like, it's insane. Thank you so much for everything, dudes. Without y'all support, It wouldn't be possible at all. I've got a lot of really awesome things in store for the channel, for YouTube, for Twitch, for things I haven't even talked about anywhere over the next few weeks and probably a couple of months leading up to 9.1 and I guess Classic Burning Crusade launch. So thank you again, dudes, for all the support. And that reminds me, this weekend we're gonna have a pretty interesting video on the channel, and then as long as everything goes according to plan, a really spicy stream next Tuesday. So let me know what you guys think of just the changes and how 9.0.5 is rolled out for locks so far in the comment section below. I wanted to make this video to recap things. There's been a lot of misinformation going around, and I just wanted to correct it. So hopefully it helped set you guys straight in some way, shape, or form. If you've heard the info already, I'm sorry, but hopefully it helped you out somewhere. Any Weak Warriors profiles or add-ons you can grab on my Twitch if you want to swing by. Any questions, drop them in the comment section below. I'll be sure to get back to you. If you guys want to see more WoW content, help support the channel, smash the like and subscribe buttons below as well. It helps out a lot. Thanks again, dudes, and I'll catch you all again soon. Peace.